Just when royal insiders thought Prince Philip's affairs had been completely settled, a sealed envelope emerged, one that would leave the monarchy stunned. Buried under layers of legal protections and obscured from even the Queen herself, this mysterious document carried one line that would ignite a firestorm. The trust is to be delivered to Lady Louise Windsor without exception. Before we go deeper into what this really means for the royal family, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss a single update. It all began with a routine financial audit inside the royal archives, a task handled each year with little fanfare and even less expectation. But this time, something shifted. Tucked inside a drawer meant for closed estate files was an unmarked legal packet. Its seal intact, its content veiled behind an ironclad confidentiality clause. When the document was finally opened, shock rippled through every echelon of palace authority. What they discovered wasn't just unexpected, it was explosive. A trust fund believed to have been dissolved or distributed years prior was not only active, it had a single beneficiary. And that name, printed clearly and unmistakably, was Lady Louise Windsor. The initial reaction was disbelief. Palace aides scrambled to decipher the trust's executive clause, hoping it had been misfiled or misread. But there it was. Prince Philip had personally hired an obscure but highly respected legal firm in Scotland, separate from traditional royal counsel, just weeks before his death. According to internal records, the firm was given strict instructions to withhold the trust's existence until after a specific audit cycle had passed, ensuring that no royal family member could intervene prematurely. This wasn't oversight, this was intentional. Even more confounding was the clarity of the directive. No co-beneficiaries, no conditions, just Lady Louise, not Charles, not Anne, not even Edward, her own father. The deliberate nature of Philip's decision sparked instant questions. Why hide this? Why now? And above all, why her? Insiders quickly leaked whispers of a deeper rift, one that had perhaps been brewing for years beneath the surface of royal unity. While Charles was preparing for kingship and Camilla busied herself with ceremonial power plays, it now appeared Prince Philip had been crafting a different legacy in silence, one anchored in the hands of a granddaughter barely seen on royal front pages. Within hours, the royal household buzzed with suspicion. Some believed this was Philip's final act of rebellion, an elegant, posthumous curveball to the system he had spent decades both supporting and questioning. Others insisted it was purely sentimental, born out of a unique connection between grandfather and granddaughter. But those speculations didn't calm the storm. They intensified it because the moment that envelope was opened, it was no longer a matter of inheritance. It became a matter of hierarchy. But if the revelation shocked the palace corridors, what came next would divide the monarchy itself, sparking whispers of betrayal, favoritism, and a looming civil war within the House of Windsor. While others in the royal family fought for attention, Lady Louise remained in the background, quiet, observant, and overlooked. But Prince Philip saw something different. Now that quiet shadow has become the epicenter of royal power and resentment. From the moment of her birth, Lady Louise was destined to exist in the periphery of the monarchy's grand spectacle. She wasn't groomed for the spotlight like William or Harry. She didn't carry the public fascination of Kate or the polarizing legacy of Meghan. Instead, Louise lived between the cracks of public scrutiny, shielded by her parents, often excluded from ceremonial affairs, and frequently labeled as the invisible Windsor. And yet, behind that silence, a slow and deliberate bond was forming, one that would become the foundation of Prince Philip's most daring final act. It began quietly weekend walks at Balmoral, shared rides in the carriage he once raced competitively, and long conversations about lineage, duty, and the meaning of the crown. While the rest of the family chased modern relevance, Louise leaned into the past. She asked about the early days, about how her great-grandmother handled war, and how her grandfather handled loss. Philip, often perceived as stern and unyielding, found solace in her curiosity. She didn't question tradition. She wanted to understand it. She didn't seek cameras. She sought comprehension. It was rare, perhaps even royal in its truest form. And for a man who had spent a lifetime molding the monarchy from the background, it was deeply moving. Insiders say there was a moment just months before his passing when Philip told a close aide, "She listens in the way no one else does anymore." It was a telling remark both as praise and criticism, because in that quiet observation, Philip may have revealed his ultimate disappointment in the rest of the family. They were too loud, too reactive, too distracted by the performance of monarchy rather than its preservation. But Louise was still, and in that stillness he saw the future he believed could withstand the noise. There were those who whispered she reminded him of the Queen in her youth, resolute, composed, untouched by vanity. Others argued it wasn't about personality at all, but about trust. Louise, with her humility and discretion, gave Philip the rarest of gifts in the royal world, confidence that her silence would guard his legacy, not sell it. That was why the trust fund, so massive and secretive, was handed to her without condition. Not because she had earned it through performance, but because she had inherited a kind of moral clarity that couldn't be taught. But the sudden pivot from obscurity to unimaginable influence came at a cost. As news of the trust's ownership spread, Louise found herself in uncharted waters. Once overlooked, she was now a name whispered in strategy rooms, scrutinized by the press, and most dangerously resented by members of her own bloodline. Because her rise wasn't just financial, it was symbolic. It posed a silent threat to the established order, a quiet contender backed by a patriarch who no longer trusted the obvious heirs. As the truth of their relationship came to light, others in the royal family began to stir, some in awe, others in disbelief. But it was the legal confrontation that turned admiration into outrage. Within hours of the fund's revelation, Queen Camilla's legal team demanded an immediate inquiry. Behind closed doors, she reportedly declared, "This was never meant for her, not over my crown." A clash was inevitable, and this time Camilla wasn't backing down. The announcement of Lady Louise as the sole beneficiary of Prince Philip's secret trust did more than just rattle the palace. It struck directly at the nerve of Camilla's long and complicated ascent. The quiet granddaughter, once regarded as irrelevant to royal succession or power, had suddenly been handed a symbol of legacy that Camilla believed should have belonged to her. Legal documents were filed with astonishing speed. Behind the velvet curtains of Clarence House, phones buzzed, advisors convened, and Camilla's expression turned from disbelief to determination. She was not about to let this stand unchallenged, not without a war. According to internal sources, Camilla viewed the trust not as an act of sentiment, but as a veiled message. To her, it was an affront, a direct slight against her station. For years she had fought to be recognized, to be accepted not just as Charles's wife, but as the queen consort in her own right. Now this secret move by a man she had long suspected of harboring doubts about her legitimacy seemed to confirm every lingering resentment. The idea that Lady Louise, a teenager with no title, no power, no voice, was gifted such authority felt to Camilla like a betrayal, not just of protocol, but of purpose. Inside Clarence House, the tension was immediate. Aides described an atmosphere thick with uncertainty. Camilla was reportedly in constant contact with legal advisors, seeking any possible loophole. One avenue explored was the challenge of Philip's mental state during the drafting of the trust, an allegation so sensitive it was quickly hushed. Another angle involved the jurisdiction of the trust's execution, hoping the obscure Scottish law firm might have overlooked a technicality, but nothing stuck. Every attempt to undermine the document was met with airtight resistance. Philip had made sure of it. Camilla's frustration soon turned to pressure. Behind closed doors, she urged Charles to act not publicly, but quietly, diplomatically. She believed that if Charles made even a modest objection, it could trigger a reconsideration. But Charles, weary of conflict and haunted by the possibility of a public backlash, refused to interfere. That refusal only deepened the rift. What had once been a political power couple began to fracture under the weight of silent disagreement. For the first time, Camilla found herself without her most reliable ally. What worried her even more, however, was a growing rumor, one she couldn't ignore. Whispers suggested that Catherine, Princess of Wales, had quietly reached out to Lady Louise. Though no meeting had been confirmed, the mere possibility of an alliance between the poised future queen and the Quiet Eyes struck Camilla like a warning bell. She knew too well that in royal circles, power is rarely shouted. It is passed in silence, in glances, in gestures unseen by the public, but unmistakable behind palace walls. Yet, while Camilla prepared for a courtroom fight, another royal took a different route, seeking answers, not through argument, but by unlocking what was hidden deep inside the vaults of the past. Behind every royal decree lies a personal sacrifice. For Prince Edward, the discovery of the trust fund shattered his emotional walls. But the most painful blow wasn't the money. It was the secret he had kept for years, one that now resurfaced with crushing clarity. At first, Edward smiled. In those fleeting moments after the revelation, he felt a quiet surge of pride. His daughter, long kept in the margins of royal life, had been chosen, honored, and entrusted with something powerful. But that pride was short-lived. What followed was not elation, but an overwhelming wave of sorrow, confusion, and unresolved guilt. Because Edward knew this wasn't just an inheritance. It was a message, and the ghost of that message had haunted him for over a decade. In private, Prince Philip had once pulled him aside during a quiet walk at Sandringham, away from the noise, away from the others. The conversation was brief, cryptic even. Edward had nodded, promising to keep her free of royal burdens. What he hadn't known then was that his father had already set a plan in motion that would one day make that impossible. Weeks after the trust fund surfaced, an aide uncovered a sealed envelope hidden in a drawer at Bagshot Park. Inside was a letter from Prince Philip addressed to Edward, written in the Duke's signature, direct tone. It read, "You did right by her, but one day they'll need someone who remembers how it all began. She is that someone, and you must let it happen, even if it breaks your heart." Edward stared at the letter for hours. The words weren't just a blessing, they were a burden. He had kept Philip's confidence for years, assuming the sentiment would remain private. But now the world knew, and with every headline, every photo of Lady Louise's rise, Edward's quiet guilt deepened. He never believed the trust fund was real. Rumors had swirled of secret accounts and private gifts, but Edward assumed it was just palace folklore stories told among staff and cousins to romanticize Philip's legacy. But the truth was more deliberate, more dangerous. Philip hadn't just left a legacy, he had chosen a successor. And in doing so, he had bypassed Charles, Anne, and even Edward himself. That realization ignited fear, not of scandal, but of what it would do to Louise. She had never been trained for power, she had never asked for it. Now she had been thrust into the center of a royal vortex, and Edward feared it would consume her. In one particularly tense conversation, Edward confronted Charles directly. "You think this was about rebellion," Edward reportedly said, "but this was about survival." He trusted her because he didn't trust what we've become. Charles, already wounded by his own exclusion, said nothing in return. But the silence between the brothers spoke volumes of legacy, of betrayal, and of a father who had played his final move with ruthless clarity. But Edward's grief was just the beginning, because the real battle would not be fought in courtrooms or private letters, but in the shifting allegiances within the royal bloodline itself. When Anne, the no-nonsense Princess Royal, speaks, everyone listens, and what she said after reading the trust's fine print was chilling. If this is enforced, it changes everything. For Anne, it wasn't about money. It was about legacy, blood, and the invisible crown that now hovered over Lady Louise from the moment the papers were read aloud in that private chamber. Anne's demeanor changed. She wasn't furious like Camilla. She wasn't wounded like Edward. She was calculating, reading between the lines, studying the clauses, understanding what so many others failed to see. This wasn't just a financial move. This was a reconfiguration of the monarchy's internal compass, and it terrified her because in Lady Louise, Anne saw a new axis forming, one that didn't rely on traditional roles, one that Philip had quietly carved with surgical precision. For Anne, who had given her life to service without fuss or fanfare, this sudden tilt toward an untested generation was more than unsettling. It was dangerous. Anne didn't speak to many about her concerns, but the few who were granted an audience with her left visibly shaken. She reportedly summoned two of her oldest confidants from the military ranks, and a constitutional historian she'd consulted during the Queen's final years. They examined the implications of Louise's financial autonomy and the trust's language. Their verdict was unanimous. This changed the power balance behind the curtain. If the monarchy was a theater, Lady Louise had just been handed the script, and everyone else, including the heir apparent's children, had been given secondary lines. Her gravest concern that this move could destabilize the roles George and Charlotte were being prepared for. In private, Anne voiced fears that if Lady Louise began to act with growing independence backed by legal power, financial resources, and moral weight from Philip's posthumous endorsement, it could create confusion in the public eye. Who speaks for the crown when the official heirs are still learning, and the quiet Windsor already commands influence? Worse still, Anne feared manipulation. Camilla, already enraged, might move to undermine Louise. Others might try to pull her into hidden alliances, treating her not as family, but as leverage. Anne knew time was not her ally. She pressed Charles to issue what insiders called a shadow decree, an informal but powerful internal edict that would outline the limits of Louise's reach within the family structure. Charles resisted, citing the will's legal clarity. Anne, frustrated but undeterred, made one last decision. She would try to guide Louise herself. In a rare move, she reportedly invited her niece for a private lunch at Gatcombe Park. Witnesses said the atmosphere was tense but respectful. Anne offered no promises, no lectures. She offered a warning. They will try to use you. Decide now who you are before they do it for you. But the most unexpected moment came not from Anne, Charles, or Camilla, but from Lady Louise herself, who decided to break her silence with a revelation that turned speculation into pure disbelief. With the entire nation watching and speculation spiraling out of control, Lady Louise addressed the storm. In a trembling voice, she uttered the sentence that would define her legacy. "My grandfather chose me for a reason, and what followed stunned even her fiercest critics." There had been silence from Windsor for days, agonizing, strategic silence. The press camped outside the gates, tabloids ran wild, and public opinion split into furious factions. Every whisper, every leaked memo added fuel to a fire that had already engulfed the monarchy, but then came the moment no one expected. Lady Louise stepping forward, not hidden behind a palace statement or filtered through family aides, but on her own, raw and unscripted, standing before the press, her hands trembling, but her eyes unwavering, she broke the silence, not with blame, but with clarity. "This isn't about power, it's about trust. He trusted me because I never asked for anything." Louise's statement immediately shifted the tone of the entire saga. She spoke not like a royal burdened by protocol, but like a young woman carrying a responsibility she never sought, but now refused to run from. She shared glimpses of private moments with Prince Philip, quiet carriage rides, where he would speak about the monarchy not as an institution, but as a fragile flame, needing protection more than praise. He never promised her a legacy. He gave her perspective, and as she recounted his words, "One day you'll be the only one who understands what this was really about." The weight of his intention finally made sense to the world. Her voice didn't waver when she turned her attention toward Camilla and Charles. She addressed them with grace but unwavering resolve. "This isn't a challenge. I am not your rival, but I won't reject what he left me. I will honor it quietly as he would have wanted." It was a message layered in diplomacy, but brimming with a subtext only insiders could fully grasp. Louise was not claiming the throne, but she was claiming the spirit of it, and in doing so, she redrew the lines of influence in the royal family. The reaction was immediate and overwhelming. Social media platforms flooded with messages of support. Hashtags bearing her name trended globally. Commentators previously skeptical called her the voice the monarchy didn't know it needed. But most striking was the response from Britain's youth. Young people who had once dismissed the royals as outdated suddenly found themselves rallying behind Louise. She was not trying to be the next Diana, nor was she a polished version of tradition. She was raw, real, and unintimidated. In their eyes she represented something new, something untouched by scandal, yet not afraid to stand in the storm. But while Louise gained the public's heart, another faction within the palace was beginning to crumble, and it started with a desperate act behind the walls of the Treasury Office. Just when the legal dust was beginning to settle, a confidential leak blew the doors off the palace's financial corridors. A string of internal communications exposed an attempt to redirect portions of the trust originating from none other than Camilla's inner circle. The scandal erupted without warning. What began as a trickle of anonymous tips to a financial oversight watchdog rapidly turned into a storm. Encrypted documents, redacted memos, and fragments of high-level email chains began circulating among royal correspondents. At the center of the revelations were two named senior financial advisors with long-standing ties to Camilla's household. These weren't distant figures. These were insiders, men who had sat in budget meetings, who had whispered in corridors, who had managed sensitive transitions of royal wealth before. Now they were exposed as having attempted to delay the legal transfer of Prince Philip's trust, citing uncertain beneficiary classification and pending internal clarification, phrases that were now understood to be strategic obstacles rather than genuine concerns. The leak included evidence of attempted asset reallocation, funds subtly moved, accounts restructured, and proposed clauses drafted to reshape the trust's interpretation. All of this occurred months before the official disclosure, suggesting that Camilla's circle may have known about the trust's contents long before the rest of the family. The implications were devastating. Independent trustees brought in after the trust's unsealing launched a forensic audit. What they found was not only alarming, it was potentially criminal. Documents showed coordinated attempts to obscure the trust's activation date and reassign small valuable holdings under temporary custodianship, potentially to delay or manipulate their final release. The palace's legal team issued a sharply worded internal memo. It didn't name names, but the phrasing was unmistakably damning. Any further interference with the execution of this trust will constitute a violation of fiduciary duty and may prompt independent legal action. That single line sent shock waves through Clarence House and beyond. Damage control began immediately. Camilla's aides issued vague denials while senior officials fell suddenly silent, but the press was relentless. Headlines began screaming of a royal coup attempt, insinuating that Camilla's camp had tried to override Prince Philip's last will in a bid to reassert control over what they viewed as a symbolic crown jewel. What was once a family dispute had now spilled into a full-blown constitutional crisis. Public trust plummeted. Protesters gathered outside royal gates demanding transparency. Commentators openly debated whether Camilla had overstepped boundaries unbecoming of a queen consort. Even former royal aides, previously cautious, began appearing on late-night panels, hinting that this might just be the tip of the iceberg. And all the while, Lady Louise remained silent, her calm refusal to respond, making her appear more composed than those scrambling behind closed doors. And just when the royal image seemed on the brink of collapse, a quiet intervention arrived from someone no one expected to act. Prince William, with his father weakened and his stepmother cornered, Prince William stepped forward. In a private council gathering, he reportedly said just 6 words, "Let her have it, it's over." What followed wasn't just silence, but a seismic shift in the royal family's future hierarchy. The walls of St. James's trembled with uncertainty as a last-minute emergency session was convened. No cameras, no courtiers, no distractions, just the corps summoned behind locked doors to confront a royal scandal spiraling beyond control. No one expected Prince William to attend. He hadn't voiced an opinion since the trust was revealed. Many believed he was carefully distancing himself from the unfolding chaos, preserving his image for the future reign. But when he walked in, composed, quiet, and unmistakably decisive, everything changed. The room held its breath. For the first time in the entire saga, the heir to the throne was ready to speak. William didn't rage. He didn't plead. He laid out a case with the clarity of a man who understood what was at stake, not just for the institution, but for the monarchy's very soul. He referenced not just legal precedent, but moral precedent. My grandfather's intent, he said, wasn't to cause division. It was to ensure stability by placing trust in someone who reminds us what we've forgotten. He pointed to the chaos that had erupted because of indecision and interference. And with that calm but cutting tone he had inherited from Diana, he stripped away the last justifications for opposition. We cannot be seen fighting our own blood over what was clearly his final wish. This is not a war we will win, and even if we did, we'd lose something far greater. The words landed like thunder. Camilla, already under pressure from the media and accused of orchestrating backdoor financial interference, reportedly sat in tight, lipped silence. Charles, weary and emotionally drained, said nothing, but when William finished, no one argued. There were no rebuttals, just the heavy truth that the battle had run its course. And then came the moment no one expected an embrace. William walked out of that meeting and found Lady Louise waiting nearby. Witnesses say she stood alone, back straight, eyes filled with questions she couldn't voice. William didn't hesitate. He stepped forward and hugged her. It wasn't political, it wasn't performative, it was personal. Charles's response was measured but telling. He issued a formal acknowledgement, his first public statement on the matter. In it, he accepted the trust's distribution as an extension of the Duke of Edinburgh's enduring legacy, and urged the nation to respect Louise's role in preserving it. Camilla, by contrast, released no statement. Her calendar cleared for weeks, appearances were cancelled. Her closest advisers went quiet. It was a quiet retreat, not of surrender, but of recalibration. By royal order, Lady Louise was granted full access and administrative control of the trust. No contest, no appeals, it was done. But as Lady Louise stood on the threshold of an unexpected destiny, the final question loomed. What would she do with the unimaginable power now in her hands? The girl once hidden from public view now holds a legacy that may reshape the monarchy itself. As cameras faded and palace doors closed, insiders whispered, "This is no longer just about inheritance. It's about the crown's direction and who controls the future." In the weeks following the final confirmation of the trust transfer, Lady Louise did something no one expected. She stepped forward, not with entitlement, but with vision. While others in the past may have used power to polish image or secure position, Louise looked backward to move forward. She announced the establishment of a royal historical trust designed to preserve, study, and publicly educate the nation about the legacy, triumphs, and failures of the monarchy through centuries. It was not just a museum, it was a statement. The crown must remember its past in order to deserve its future. The trust would be independently governed, but rooted in Philip's ideals, discipline, legacy, and silence, when silence speaks louder than spectacle. But she wasn't finished. With the unexpected support of several younger royals and even independent advisors, Louise proposed the formation of a royal youth advisory body, an unprecedented move that would allow selected young voices across the Commonwealth to contribute ideas, critiques, and cultural insight directly to the royal charitable institutions. She called it The Bridge, a name that made it clear she wasn't aiming to replace anyone, but rather to connect. In a time where generational divides had plagued the monarchy's public image, Louise positioned herself not as a ruler or rebel, but as a reconciler. Then came the first official appearance, a modest engagement in Edinburgh, tied to a historical preservation initiative long supported by Prince Philip. But the symbolism was undeniable. Louise walked into that event not as a silent granddaughter, but as the executive of her grandfather's final ambition. Crowds gathered, not out of curiosity, but out of quiet admiration. No titles were announced, no red carpets rolled, and yet the message was heard louder than any royal parade could deliver. Quiet does not mean irrelevant. Public sentiment swelled behind her. Commentators began to describe her as a new kind of royal archetype, modern without flash, regal without arrogance. Behind closed doors, however, there was unrest. Camilla's closest allies reportedly expressed concern that Louise's popularity was growing too fast, too early. One even warned, if the public sees her as the new Diana, the game changes. But Louise wasn't trying to be Diana. She wasn't trying to be anyone but herself, and in that refusal to conform, she gained what many royals struggled to find: authenticity. Weeks later, as additional pages of Prince Philip's trust were quietly released to the family, one final line stood out. Written in his unmistakable hand, it read, "To the one who listens, not speaks." In hindsight, it was never about titles or wealth. It was about who could carry the weight of memory without demanding a crown, and Louise, in her stillness, had been heard more loudly than any speech could ever deliver. And so, from sealed envelopes to royal revolutions, one thing is now clear: the quietest Windsor may become the loudest legacy the crown has ever known. Thanks for watching. Please don't forget to like and subscribe, and we will see you in next.